Let's get into cutting the fabric for our patterns. And you saw we cut the interfacing out. Now we need to cut the fabric. Now remember that I'm going to show you the method where we use 4 pieces for each set on each shirt. And I'm going to show you 2 methods of finishing the bottom. So I'm going to allow a little bit more on these upper 2 just to show you the method. It's different. These 3 here have no seams. And so before I do that, what I'm going to do is, I bought a yard, and it was $5.50 a yard. And this particular piece, when I fold it, ends up being 24 inches. So I'm only going to use 24 inches out of the yard. And the reason being, if it's $5.50 a yard, and you divide that by 36 inches, because that's 1 yard length, each inch is costing me 15 cents. Now I'm using 24 inches of the yard, so times 24. This whole piece here is costing me $3.66. $3.66 for this piece that I'm going to use. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up, because I'm going to put the pieces back now. I'm going to get 5. Now you can see there's a little room, but you need a little room on there. So I'm getting 5 sets of cups. That means I'm going to be able to make 5 shirts out of this. So if this whole piece is costing me $3.66, and I divide that by 5 cuffs, the fabric for each set of cuffs is going to cost me 73 cents. And remember, we calculated the interfacing. Interfacing was 35 cents. So it's just a little over $1, say $1.03 for each cuff. That's a hell of a profit. Now, each cuff shouldn't take you more than somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. Let's say an hour. So an hour at $25 a set, that's $125. We already said that each cuff is costing us a little over $1. So we're pretty close to a little less than $120 to make these cuffs in 1 hour. That's a hell of a profit. And it only happens if you become efficient and you're accurate. So follow my instructions, very careful. Now, the thing about this thing here too is that what I did is I always like to soak my fabric. So before I even fold it, now this is folded twice. Here it is. This is 45-inch goods, and I'm only using 24 of the 1 yard. So I folded it in half, and because I need 4 pieces, it's pretty easy and convenient to do it this way. But before I even do that, while I had it in the open stage, I would have been spraying and shrinking the fabric. Now, I'm going to shrink again when I get to the individual pieces, but I like to iron as I go, continually iron, and I think you'll get the idea. So again, let me put it on back. I'm going to put the pieces, the pattern pieces back. The ones with the red have seam allowances. Like I said, I'm going to allow more on these here. And then I'm going to use the ones without seam allowances here. And again, I'll use my stapler, heavy stapler, and I will cut each piece. And I don't need a whole lot of round, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this one here. And I'm going to keep them together. So I got one. This has no seams. I only need like a 1/2 inch on the bottom and a 1/2 inch at top. You beginners might allow a little bit more. Now I usually cut 4 pieces. You could put this on the fold. That's another method. You get used to a certain method and you use it, and this is what I do, but I'll show you the other eventually. Again. Okay, and these are all ones with no seams. Now these 2 are going to have seams. And I'm going to cut it so that I have a little bit more than normal. It's about 1 inch there. And I'm going to cut it pretty close to the top. because I'm going to show you a different clean finish on this particular type. So again, then what I would do is I would cut the folds open like yay. And let me bring this one in here just to show you how I work in most cases. And I would open them up, holding your hand, and turn it in the other way, and opening the folds. Okay, so now I've got the seams. These are the ones with the seams. I'm going to keep these together. I'm going to bring the seamless, and I'm going to open those up. So you can get it on. Okay. I open the folds. That's one. Open the folds. Two. And the last one is the angle one. This has no seams also. And again, I'll open the folds. So I've got 4 pieces for each shirt set. Okay. And that's the actual cutting. Now I'm going to show you the prep on the clean finish. That's the part that's going to attach to the sleeve. I'll show you how I prepare the 2 types of sleeve finishes. Okay, we're going to run the second part of the fabric cutting, but before we do that, we're going to remove the staples. And I can't stress, find yourself a good staple remover. They're not all the same, believe me. You may have to buy several before you find some that really work well. So just, you can always tell, just like you saw there, if they're working, they're beautiful. And if they're not, I wouldn't even use them. They're not that expensive, but when you find some good ones, hold on to them. Again, so now on the fusible, we don't shrink anything. What you do basically is you make them bigger. That's what you do. You make them bigger. For example, if a non-fusible finish is going to be 10, you would make the non-fusible a 1/2 inch bigger, 10.5, because you're going to allow for shrinkage. They will shrink. You will shrink the fabric on the fusible as well as the non-fusible, and the only difference between the fusible and the non-fusible is the interfacing on the non-fusible. You'll shrink just like you do the fabric. So again, what we'll do is, let's go back to the fabric. I'm going to take the round, and so I have round, and the technique will be the same. I'm not going to sew them. I'm not going to show you all of them here. In the trimming section, I'll show you how each of them was finished and then how it was trimmed. But I'm basically going to show you the same theory now. Again, I've got the seams. This one here has seams and it's round. And remember what I said, each one of these requires 2 pieces of fabric. So there's 1 and there's 2. And before I do that, what I normally do is I shrink the fabric again. I showed you in the beginning how we did that. So let me get my spray bottle, and what I normally do is I spray it. Now this is for fusible and non-fusible, 100% fabrics. I wouldn't do this to polyester. So that's what you're going to do, is you're going to shrink it. And it's kind of a misnomer. I have an additional video that I'll include in this cuff replacement on the shrinking of fabric. But what you do is, basically what you're doing is you're pulling it with your left hand, using the iron as a weight. And really what you're doing is you're stretching it. We refer to it as shrinking. After you stretch it, it'll end up in the final state. And so there, when you fuse the fabric, the interfacing onto the fabric, it's not going to go anywhere. So again, you do this for a few minutes. I would work on it more. I'd spray it again and again until I get it in the final stage. Now, I would do this for each side. Now I have 2 cuffs. So here we go. Here's the cuffs, and these are fusible, and these have seams. And so I'm going to take one of them. You'll be working on the wrong side. And this particular fabric is the same on both, but if it had a right and a wrong, you'd be looking at the wrong side. You'll put your interfacing on it. And normally what I do is I get my hot iron and I temporarily fuse it. Because this is going to go into the fusing your heat press. There's another video. It's included under how to fuse fabric using the heat press. I won't go into it specifically here, so you'll have to watch that. But this is the setup that you do before you put it in the machine. You want to temporarily hold it while you put it in the machine. Now, this has seam allowances, and this is going to be a different finish. So what you're going to do, I normally recommend that you use a water-soluble pen. You can do this like the old shirt makers. You don't need to use glue, but for the demonstration purposes, I'm going to put glue on it. And this will be the clean edge, one side of it. Okay? Now, after putting this in the fusing machine, it's not going to go anywhere. Now, you take the other piece and you'll put it right sides to right sides. And what I normally do is I use a weight. And what I do is I fold it, turn it to the wrong side, and I fold the edges like this. Right on the edge. Now, you got right side to right side. You have the seam or the fabric folded to the wrong side on both pieces. Now, when you go to the sewing machine, let me get you a little better view here. When you go to the sewing machine, you want to make sure that the top piece is just a hair in front of the bottom piece. And you'll stitch your 1/4 inch. This is the one that has the seam allowances, and you'll come all the way around. And you'll back tack. After it's been clean finished, you'll end up with a cuff that is like the sample I'm going to show you. So basically what happens is you have this piece, you've turned it right sides to right sides, and you've ironed it and you've top stitched it. And then what you'll do is you'll run a stitch about 1/2 inch from this edge on the right sides. Now, this keeps the fabric together, but that's not the ultimate thing. The ultimate thing is that when you go to put your sleeve in, this stitch that you put on there won't allow it to go past that stitch. And so if you just hold it against where the stitch finishes, it'll keep it even all the way through folding your pleats. And I'll show you in a separate tutorial how to make the pleats. But you can see the stitch that you did 1/2 inch from here won't allow the fabric to go beyond that. So it's created an even segment where you're going to, no matter how, you're going to just push it in there against that, and it's going to be even all the way through. This is how a lot of manufacturers do it. This is one method, and the other method I'll show you here shortly. So that's the rationality behind that. Now, this will make more sense when I go to the machine and show you how I sew it, and I'll use contrasting thread so you can see exactly how it's going to happen. So that's this segment. Now, I'm going to do the other. I'm going to use one without the seam. Here's one with a seam. And again, I'm going to just, I'm going to just pretend here that I've already shrunk them. This particular fabric, it's the same on both sides. So what I'm doing now is, now I'm going to use a non-seam. So here, let me get a non-seam. So again, I make sure that I have a little bit up here because I'm going to be stitching. When there's no seam, you'll be stitching on the edges, right next to the interfacing. The first stitch, again, before you put it in the heat machine, you will go ahead and iron it down so it sticks. So it allows you to take it to the machine without falling apart. And then you'll fold the stitch here. And then when you go to the machine, you'll do a 1/4 inch or 3/8 to hold that all together. And obviously this will already be glued because it's been in the machine. Now, when you take the other piece, you'll put it right sides to right sides. And you will stitch like normal. Again, you will go from bottom. Now here, you're using the edge outline of the interfacing because there's no seams on this one. Again, you'll go on the edge and off. And then ultimately, what you will do is you will take your see-through roller and you will create a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And this is after it's been turned. And I'll show you that in the sewing. So that's the difference. One, the seam allowance is on the outside. The clean finish with the other is they're put together, and the final stitch is going to hold a clean line. So I'll show you the actual sewing, and I'll show you the actual turning and trimming in the next tutorial.